I often encounter people who are really trying to logic their way out of seeing racism, logic their way out of acknowledging racism. And it's just like you said, okay, well, I published this article in the newspaper. People are always saying, like, this is how newspapers operate, but yet they won't publish the follow up. Where's the logic behind that? And the logic is there. It's just something that if you accept it, then you have to accept that this whole mechanism of white supremacy that exists, and that is the difficult part, is being willing to accept it. But once you do, a lot of things start making sense that didn't make sense before. But then that leaves you in a world where even if you have this best-selling article,
Yeah.
that you may not get published again, and that's something you
Yeah.
have to then accept. So double whammy, you know what I mean?
Well, there's a friend of mine, Ben Ulancy on Medium. I wrote an article and I was talking about something, and it was a conversation I saw between a friend of mine who's an immigrant and he's a mechanic and one of his customers. And the customer came in with, he's like, "Oh, this election." He's like, "How is it that of all the people in the United States, we have these two choices, you know?" And it's like, he's a liar, but she is too. And I was sitting there watching this and I was biting my tongue because it was at this guy's place of work, and I'm just like, okay. But in this article I wrote, I talk about the scenario. It's like, clearly it's like one of them is a very good choice and one of them is it's not a good choice, let's just say. So but Ben Ulancy said, "Have you ever heard of the concept called the thought terminating cliche?" And I'm just like, "What is that?" And he's like, "This is a rhetorical tactic that's often used, where you say something that's a generalization that kind of sounds reasonable, but it's to kind of provoke a kind of false agreement, superficially. But in reality, the idea is to stop the process of critical thought. So when you say something like, they're both equally bad. It's like, well, it's like, I don't seem like I'm giving up that much if I just say okay. And then it's like we've created a kind of false sense that we can, false common ground. But really, they're hitting you with this, and like other the thought terminating cliches are things like, uh, you can't, or it's like both sides are violent. They'll say things like that. That's not reality. Or they'll say education's not a problem you can solve by throwing money at it. And it's sort of like every single, once you look at it, it's like every single argument in the whole the Republicans use is just designed to divert away from any kind of critical, deeper thought. We're supposed to accept this kind of absurd generalization that they apply to things, and on the illusion of the significance of that generality that they throw out, we have to accept some procedure or some policy that's not going to function at all. So it's just, this is another one of those cases though where we're constantly diverted, and this isn't even one of the aggressive ones. I mean, there's all those other cases where they'll deliberately ban books, or they'll ban teaching certain history. So those are the aggressive actions. Those are the ones we focus on. But the ones that are at play all the time are things like these rhetorical tactics that just keep us from being even capable of having conversations that might, to be to the benefit of humanity.
Oh yeah. And there's all kinds of tactics to limit conversation. Exactly like you were saying, there's the macro actions and then there's the micro actions, and they're connected. Sometimes they filter down. And sometimes they're just kind of endemic to the culture that we've created over the generations as well. So, it's interesting you talked about the book bans. It kind of reminded me, do you know the live streamer Destiny by any chance?
No.
So he's one of the biggest kind of live streamers out there. He built up his brand. He talks about politics a lot. He does debate. He's very much a big part of the debate culture. He's got a huge YouTube channel and whatnot. And I ended up getting him on a conversation, the two of us, because I was so frustrated watching him talk about the subject of race. Because, he is someone who kind of creates conversations just to kind of argue. He doesn't really have any
Okay.
bigger goal. He's creating content. You know what I mean? He is truly a pure content creator. Like, that is what he is doing. He's not after anything. And so it's just so frustrating. So he was like, he asked me, he's like, well, how do you want me to talk about race differently? What's the issue that you find with me talking about race? And I told him it's a lack of purpose. Like, where is the purpose in your conversations? And part of the reason that I created this show in the first place is because I found that there was a huge lack of purpose in the conversations on race that I was seeing that were being most promoted, or that the purpose was that same kind of terminate critical thought that you mentioned before. Like, just like, no, everything's fine, like race is basically over. We just have to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Or, like that kind of narrative. And it's just so infuriating. But the reason I remembered that is because he was asking about book bans. One thing he constantly does is he fact checks people in real time. And he's like, oh, you were totally wrong about that. So I was mentioning to him that Ruby Bridges, right, her book about her story um, was banned in Florida. And she's still going around, doing work, and giving speeches and whatnot. And they banned her book, and she's still out here doing the thing.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, going crazy on his keyboard, typing, looking that up, and then he sees it. He's he did not believe that at all. And then he sees it. He's just like stopped in his tracks, just
Yes.
like looking at that. And I'm like, the reason why these things can happen right under people's noses is because it is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that they would try to ban ban this woman's book, ban this woman's story, try to erase her while she's still here.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support and see you next time.